A survivor of a plane crash was found after 1,183 days on an island. But they discover something surprising about her. The air on the island is heavy. It sticks to the skin like a dirty hand. It smells like old salt, rotting leaves, smoke that stopped burning long ago. The sun hits without mercy. It's not a pretty sun. It's a sun that punishes. It makes everything too bright, with no shade to hide anything. The forest close to the sand feels alive. The trees are twisted, full of knots. The leaves make a soft sound, a shh, shh, even without strong wind. And in the middle of that sound, there's another, a sound that doesn't belong to the island. A dry snap, a step, then another, and then she appears. She doesn't walk out like a normal person. She comes from the side, fast, like an animal that doesn't trust anything. Her body is too thin. Her skin, once looked after, is now sun leather, peeling in some spots, stained in others. Her hair is a tangled mess, tied anyway with plant fibers, with dirt stuck in it, with broken ends. Her face has hard lines, not from age, from fighting. Her feet are the first thing you notice. No sandals, nothing, just thick, cracked skin. The soles are full of old cuts and some new open ones. One is still fresh with dark blood drying on the edges. She steps and doesn't even make a face, like pain is just part of the ground. In her right hand, she holds a makeshift spear, a long piece of wood shaped on stone, with a sharp tip tied with vine. The vine is thick, tight, full of finger marks. Looks like she tied and retied it 1,000 times. And the tip has little marks, tiny scratches, like it's hit living things before. Fish, snake, maybe something bigger. She doesn't stop at the edge of the forest. She takes 2 more steps out, just enough to see everything, to measure the world with her eyes. On her back, there's a child, tied, not in her arms, not by the hand, on her back, stuck to her like part of her own body, held by vines crossing her chest and going under the child's arms, holding tight, very tight. It's a tie made in a rush, but with care too, like it's the only way to run without leaving the little one behind. The child isn't sleeping, awake, too quiet. The little face shows over her shoulder, dirty cheek, sharp eyes. A nose crusted with salt, the mouth closed and the chin resting on the torn cloth she wears as clothing. A rag, a piece of cloth that was once a shirt, or a dress, no one knows. Now it's just enough to cover her from the sun and scratches. The vine holding the child has red liquid dirt on it. Not much, not dripping, but it's there. A dry red line in one part, and darker in another, like someone tied too hard and the skin broke. You can see the mark on the child's shoulder, a thin, hurt line, and you can see it on her chest too, near the collarbone, where the vine rubbed so much it wounded her. She feels it for sure, but she doesn't let go, because letting go means dying. She breathes short, not like someone tired, like someone waiting for an attack at any second. Her eyes scan the place. Sand, stones, the sea, the forest's edge, the sky. She doesn't look like someone curious. She looks like someone counting enemies. And then the sound comes again. At first it feels far away, a rumble in the air. Then it becomes a shake. The sand near the water even vibrates a bit, like the ground is scared. She freezes for half a second. The child on her back feels it too. The little body stiffens, but doesn't cry, doesn't make a sound, like it already learned the hard way that crying brings bad things. The rumble grows. It comes from above. It comes fast. The sound of blades cuts the sky like a knife. It doesn't belong to the island. It's a city sound, a machine sound, a people sound, and her face changes. It's not normal fear. It's terror mixed with anger. Her shoulders rise, stiff. The spear arm lifts. Her hand grips tighter. Her fingers are thin, but the strength there is iron. She turns a bit to the side, putting her body between the sound and the child, like a shield, like a wall. She takes 1 step back, looking for the forest's shade, but not running yet. She froze in fear. First, she wants to see. First, she wants to be sure. The blades get louder, closer, and the wind they make comes like a slap. It lifts the sand, throws leaves in the air, pushes her hair into her face. The child curls up on her back, pressing its forehead into her shoulder. She doesn't look back to check if the little one is okay. She doesn't need to. She feels the weight, feels the shaking. And then, without knowing, she makes a low sound, not a word, not a scream, a warning, a short, dangerous, more a growl than a voice. Like she's telling the sky, don't come closer. The spear points up, following the noise. The tip shines for a second in the sun. Her body takes a fighting stance, knees bent, feet firm in the sand, ready to run or attack. The island made her like this. Not a mother of hugs and photos, a mother of blood, of silence and escape. And the sound of the blades keeps growing, like the old world is coming down without asking. The wind blows harder now, heavy like the air is being pushed by force. The sand starts to swirl in little circles. Dry leaves rise and spin, hitting the tree trunks. The sound of the blades gets so loud it feels like it enters the chest, making the heart shake too. Up above, the shadow comes first. A dark circle crossing the sun. Then the body of the helicopter starts to appear, coming down slowly but with strength, like a huge beast landing. The machine doesn't care about the island. It just comes and takes up space. As the helicopter gets closer to the ground, the noise turns into a punch. The forest bends with the wind. Sand flies and hits her face, burns her eyes, goes into her mouth. She presses her lips tight and doesn't blink much. She can't lose sight of anything. Inside the helicopter you can see shapes, helmets, vests, people with headsets, hands holding things. But that's not what matters. The door opens with a jolt, a short, dry metal sound almost lost in the noise of the blades. And then he appears. He doesn't wait for the helicopter to fully land. He leans out and jumps. His foot sinks into the sand right away, not like someone arriving for a visit, like someone who's late for something that was his whole life. He's wearing expensive clothes. That's clear even with the sand flying. His shirt is light, but already has sweat and dust marks. The trousers are stiff, good fabric, and his body, it's big, broad shoulders, a posture of someone who's always entered places being obeyed. But now his power isn't in what he wears, it's in how he looks. He lifts his face into the wind, even with sand hitting him, and his eyes go straight to her, not to the forest, not to the sea, not to the men behind, to her, locked on her. For a second he seems to forget to breathe, and no one sees this. Inside him something breaks. An old hard knot he carried for years cracks, because he's not looking at a stranger, he's looking at a ghost that turned into flesh. His chest tightens hard, a pressure that's not just fear, it's guilt. It's hunger for truth, it's shock. His mind tries to speak with reason. It can't be. But instinct shouts louder than any words. It's her. He takes a step forward without thinking. The sand sticks to his expensive shoe. The wind pulls at his clothes. The smell coming from the helicopter fills everything. Fuel, hot metal, rubber. A strange smell in the middle of all that salt and earth. And that smell hits her like poison. Her body reacts before her mind understands. Her shoulders tighten even more. Her hand grips the spear. She pulls the child a bit higher on her back, just a quick automatic move to hold him better. The vine stretches, and the red mark on the boy's shoulder shows more. He doesn't cry, just opens his eyes wide, following the man's movement. The man notices. His eyes drop quickly without meaning to. Just a second. And then he sees. The little one. Skin dirty from the sun. Messy hair. Eyes too sharp for such a young child. And the eyes are light, just like his. It hits him like a blow. His stomach turns. His throat closes. He swallows hard, but it feels stuck. His hand trembles a bit, just a bit. A small shake he hates to feel because he's not a man who shakes. But here it's different. Behind him, the team starts to come down too. One of them reaches out, like he's going to hold his shoulder, like he wants to say, "Sir, calm down." Another points at her and says something no one hears properly because of the noise. But he doesn't listen. He raises a hand without looking back and makes a short gesture, telling them all to stop. It's the gesture of someone in charge, someone who's always been obeyed, and they all stop. He's alone now, a few meters from her, with wind and sand between them, like a warpath. And then the small, cruel detail shows right in front of them. On his wrist, a luxury watch, one of those that shine in any room. One of those that marks time like time, is something you can buy. But now it's covered in sand. The sand got into the cracks, stayed in the corners, stuck to the strap. The shine disappeared under that dust. His time, so rich, so full of certainty, now looks dirty. He takes another step, very slow. His hand still raised, open, trying to show he has no weapon. Trying to show peace. But peace doesn't exist in her mind. The island didn't teach peace, the island taught. First you save yourself, then you think. She leans her body forward. Her knees bend more. The spear rises to the line of his chest. Her look is hard, wild, no space for talking. The man stops, and the air that comes into his chest is hot and full of sand. He feels his throat scratch. He opens his mouth like he's going to say her name, but no sound comes out. And then she makes the final move, the clearest, most direct one. She stretches her arm. The tip of the spear is just a few centimeters from him, right at the exact spot, the heart, as if she's saying without words, "One more step, and I stab." And the whole world for a second gets stuck in this strange silence, a silence that exists even with the blade screaming behind. The tip of the spear stays still, trembling just a little right in front of his chest. He feels the wind from the helicopter pushing his shirt against his body. He feels grains of sand hitting his face, but none of that matters as much as that piece of wood pointed at the place where his heart beats. He doesn't raise his hands anymore. One is already open, like he's asking for calm, and the other is close to his body, too scared to make any quick move, because he knows, one wrong move, and she'll react. Her eyes don't blink. It's a burnt, hard look, not one that says sorry. She breathes through her nose, short breaths, like she's holding back the urge to run and to attack at the same time. And then, in the middle of this frozen moment, something small happens, something silly, almost nothing. Her torn shirt, pulled by the wind, opens a little more at the chest. The fabric, already loose from so much use, slips just a bit, and something falls out. At first it's just a dull shine, a little piece of old metal. Then, the pendant, a thin necklace, worn, darkened with salt and sweat. The chain is bent, with rusty marks in some parts. But it hasn't broken, it didn't vanish. It stayed there, stuck to her for years. The pendant swings in the wind and hits her chest with a soft tock, tock, like a metal heart beating with hers. The pendant has a crack, a light line cutting through the middle. Like one day it was hit hard and almost broke. But it didn't break. It just cracked. Just like her. Time bends. Inside it, it's like everything fades for a second. The sound of the blades grows distant. The wind seems to turn into silence. The sand in the air moves in slow motion. He recognizes that necklace without even thinking, because he was the one who put it around her neck. He remembers his fingers shaking at the back of her neck, trying to fasten the clasp, nervous, laughing to hide it. He remembers her softly complaining the chain was cold. He remembers the kiss that came after, quick, shy, like they were embarrassed to be happy in front of others. And now that same pendant is there, cracked, hitting her chest on marked skin, over rags, over survival. His eyes drop to the necklace and freeze. His throat tightens so much it feels like it will hurt. He can't speak, not even a "hey," not her name, just breathes. Heavy air, full of sand, cutting like a knife. His face changes. It's not the face of a rich man, not the face of a boss, not the face of a man who gives orders. It's the face of someone who's just seen living proof of a promise. And he feels a thought come, clear, brutal, without asking, You kept that." And another thought comes right after, worse, "And I couldn't bring you back." His open hand shakes a bit more, but he doesn't lower it. He tries not to scare. He tries to stay still, like a rock. She notices his look at the necklace. For a moment, her firmness slips just a tiny bit, almost invisible. Just a millimeter, like that object pulled something old inside her, something she buried to survive. But she reacts fast. Her body goes back into animal mode. The spear doesn't drop. Her eyes turn hard again, but the necklace stays there, swinging, tapping, calling. The child on her back, who had been quiet, stretches his neck a bit to see better. His small face shows more. His light eyes fix on the man and don't look away. It's not the look of a curious child. It's the look of someone measuring danger. The boy watches like he's seeing a different kind of predator. One without bared teeth but big. He holds part of the vine with both hands, like it's the only safe thing in the world. His fingers are dirty, with black nails from the soil, but his grip is strong. The man feels it. Feels like a hot and cold shock at once. Because he's seen that look before, he's seen it in the mirror. That way of looking without asking. That way of staying quiet and holding everything inside. And the boy's eyes reflect the helicopter behind, a spinning light inside his pupils, like the modern world is trapped inside the wild look of that child. He doesn't need a test, doesn't need paper, doesn't need anything. His head tries to be right, tries to be careful, tries to remember the rules. But his instinct, the same instinct that made him jump out of the helicopter without waiting for anyone, screams with a painful certainty, "He's mine." And that certainty comes with a huge weight. Because if he is his, then that child lived through hunger, fear, cold, illness, without him, and he feels anger. Anger at himself, anger at time, anger at the world that let it happen, but he swallows it, because now is not the time to explode, now is the time not to scare. The boy keeps staring. His small mouth moves in a strange way, like he's making a sound that's not a word, a low sound from his throat, almost a grrr. His body tenses on her back, and then comes the warning. The boy growls. It's not loud, it's not a shout. It's a short growl, full of defense, like a wounded animal that learned early that if it doesn't show its teeth, the world bites first. And in that same second, she grips the spear tighter, like the growl from her son was a silent order. Protect. And the man stays there, frozen, heart pounding too hard, feeling that one wrong word might break everything. And that even so, he already can't take his eyes off that cracked pendant, or those light eyes that are his. Her body moves first before the thought. She takes a quick step forward, sinking her foot into the sand, and the spear follows, firm, straight, like it's part of her arm. Her shoulder turns hard, like someone who learned to strike before being struck. Her chest rises and falls in short breaths. Her eyes don't blink, no talking. No who are you? No space for that. To her, that man is not a memory. He is a threat. He is the old world coming back with noise, with machine, with people, with the smell of fuel. The world that once promised safety and then disappeared. The world that always takes and then goes. He feels the tip of the spear too close again, feels his own heart pounding, and at the same time feels a strange calm inside him, a hard calm, because right there, in that moment, he understands one simple thing. If he scares her, he loses, and he won't lose. Behind him, one of the rescuers, nervous, takes a step forward, maybe to help, maybe by instinct, maybe because he thinks she's going to attack, but his foot lands on a hidden rock in the sand and slips. The sound is sharp, a loud, hard thud that's too much for her ears. On the island, a sound like that is never good. A sharp sound means a branch breaking, a snake moving, a big animal coming, someone arriving to cause harm. Her whole body shivers. Her eyes widen just a bit, only a bit, and then fear turns to fire. Instinct screams louder than any memory. She steps half a step back, then quickly turns her whole body, pulling the boy along, and runs. But it's not the run of someone desperate. It's the run of an animal that knows the land. She steps where it's firm, dodges stones without looking, disappears into the edge of the forest like a shadow. 1 second she's there, the next she's gone. The team moves, ready to go after her, and the man raises his hand at once. His voice comes out low, deep, cutting through everything, even with the helicopter noise. Stay, don't come. It's not a request, it's an order. And there's a strange weight in that order. Like everyone there already knows that if they disobey, they'll regret it. The men stop. One tries to say something, but the man's look kills the words before they're born. He doesn't look at the team anymore. He only looks at the forest where she disappeared. And then he goes, alone. He enters the forest like someone stepping into a sacred and dangerous place. The light changes straight away. He leaves the open sun and steps into dark green, full of shadow and little dots of light between the leaves. The air becomes damper. The smell changes. Wet earth, crushed plants, old wood. The sound changes too. In here, the helicopter becomes a distant thunder, and the island starts whispering again. Insect, leaf, branch, breathing. He steps slowly, very slowly. His expensive shoe sinks into mud, sticks, pulls, makes noise. He tries to step carefully, tries to walk the way she would, but he doesn't belong here. He's big, heavy, strange to this land. Even so, he keeps going, and inside him, guilt comes like a wave. I arrived too late. He feels like running, shouting her name, telling everyone to search. But he holds it back. He learns in seconds what she learned in years. Rushing makes noise. Noise kills. Further ahead, between high roots and moss-covered rocks, she hides. She picks a good spot. A big rock covered in dark green moss with a crack just wide enough to fit her body. She stays there, half crouched, half ready to jump, the spear still in her hand. The boy pressed against her back, quiet, his eyes over her shoulder. Her body shakes, not from cold, from adrenaline. She controls her breathing like a hunter, takes in little air, lets out little air, doesn't want anyone to hear. The man appears between two trees, a few meters away. He sees the rock. He doesn't see her at first, but he feels it. Feels like the air is heavier in that spot. He stops, doesn't move forward, stays still. His hands hang open beside his body. He doesn't make any sudden moves, doesn't bend down to pick up a rock, doesn't reach into his pocket. Nothing. He just stays there, breathing, trying not to scare her. And inside him, the thought pounds. I know you're there. He takes a small step, then stops again, like he's stepping on glass. His voice comes out very low, almost swallowed by the forest. I won't hurt you. But she doesn't reply. Not a sound. Only her eyes from behind the rock slicing through him. The boy, still quiet, but his eyes move fast, watching the man's every move. The man sees that words aren't enough. Words are from the old world, and the old world only brought her pain. He swallows, closes his eyes for a second, and when he opens them, he stops speaking. He sings. Not loudly, not beautifully, not like a singer. He sings like a broken man. The voice comes out weak, dry, like it's rusted inside. He gets part of it wrong, breathes, tries again, and even so he keeps going. It's the song, the wedding song. The one he sang nervously, laughing at himself with his voice cracking in the chorus, and she had laughed with her hand over her mouth, moved and shy at the same time. The song that got stuck in a night of lights and promises. Here, in the forest, the song doesn't sound romantic. It sounds like a rope thrown to someone drowning. Her reaction doesn't come from the head. It comes from the body. Her shoulder drops 0.5 centimeter. The hand holding the spear loses strength. Her chest holds the air, like she's been punched inside. She knows that melody. She knows the wrong way he hits the chorus. Knows the small pause he always made before the prettiest part, like he was scared of sounding silly. Time cracks. The rock, the moss, the mud, all vanish for a second. And what comes back is the altar, the light of the place, his hand shaking in hers. The promise she swore she'd never remember again, because remembering hurt too much. The spear falls with no drama, no strength, just slips from her hand and hits the wet ground with a soft sound. The wood in the mud, the moss splashing, her bare feet nearby, and the weapon on the ground like her body gave up fighting for a moment. Her breath breaks, and the crying comes before any thought. It's not pretty crying, not movie crying. It's an ugly sob stuck for years, bursting out like she's choking. Her chest trembles. Her face twists. She tries to hold it back but can't. Her legs give way. She leans on the rock and slips down a bit, sitting crooked like she lost the strength to stand. The boy on her back stirs, restless, but doesn't cry. He just feels her change. And for the first time he seems confused, because she was always stone, and now she's breaking. The man stops singing, but the last note still hangs in the air like something alive. He doesn't come closer. Not yet. He just breathes, feeling his chest ache, feeling his eyes burn, and then, almost without a voice, she whispers. It's a tiny sound, a name that comes out scratchy, like her throat forgot how to speak. His name. She says it like someone tasting an old word in their mouth. And the moment the name hits the ground with the spear, she lifts her tear-filled eyes to him, still not sure if she can come any closer. She stays sitting on the wet ground, leaning against the rock, her chest going up and down fast. Her face is wet and she doesn't even wipe it. It's like she doesn't know how. Her hands stay near her body, empty, because the spear is on the ground, fallen in the mud. He stands a few meters away. His eyes shine in a strange way. It's not victory, it's pain, it's relief mixed with fear. He swallows hard and takes one small, slow step, just one, like someone getting close to a hurt animal. She looks up straight away. Her body goes stiff again, by reflex. Trust doesn't exist yet. Crying doesn't erase 3 years of fear. Her body is still ready to run at any second. The boy on her back moves his face over her shoulder, and his light eyes follow the man. He doesn't growl now, but he doesn't relax either. His little hand still holds the vine tightly, like that's the only rule in the world. The man opens his mouth, trying to speak softly, trying to be human, but there's no time. A loud bang cuts through the forest, a dry and violent sound coming from behind, from the direction of the beach. It could be a helicopter door slamming. It could be some equipment falling. It could be a rock rolling. No one knows. The sound just exists. And in her mind, a sound like that is never small. Her body reacts like the bang was a gunshot. She jumps, even while sitting. Her eyes go wide, her breathing stops. Her heart feels like it wants to come out of her mouth. Her hands search for the spear on the ground, desperate, feeling around in the mud, but her fingers slip, shaking. The boy jumps like it's a shock. He pulls in tight, and the first thing he does is hold his breath. Like air could give him away, his eyes go huge. His mouth opens, but no crying comes, no sound, just a small shake in his chin. And that's the worst part, because a child that doesn't cry is a child who learnt that crying doesn't help. She really panics now. Her panic isn't screaming, it's running inside. Her body wanting to disappear. Her shoulders go up, her neck disappears. Her arms open like she's going to grab the boy and pull him off her back to run better. The vine gets tighter. The little one gets stuck, not understanding, and his fear grows. The man sees it and doesn't think, doesn't ask, doesn't wait for permission. He moves first. He's fast but in control, one big step then another. He throws himself forward and drops to his knees on the ground right next to her, between her and the direction of the sound. The mud messes up his expensive trousers, but he doesn't feel it. He takes off the vest on top of his clothes, a heavy rescue vest full of pockets, and pulls it hard, like tearing off armor. The move is rough, but the way he puts the vest over them is gentle. He covers them both, covers her and the boy, like the vest is a roof, and then he does more. He leans his body over the vest over them and uses his chest like a wall. He becomes a shelter with his body. His head lowers, his shoulders close in, and he stays there, kneeling strong, taking the wind, taking the sand, taking it all. His voice comes deep and soft, close to her ear with no orders, no threats. Shh, it's all right, I'm here. He doesn't say, trust me. He doesn't say, it's me. He just says the simplest thing in the world, I'm here. And that makes all the difference because she spent years with no one here. She shakes, really shakes. Her hands that were holding a weapon minutes ago now shake like wet leaves. She tries to push him away by instinct, trying to make space to run, but he doesn't move back. He also doesn't hold her tight. He just stays, firm, present. The boy stuck on her back feels the warmth of the man's body above, feels the weight protecting, feels the world getting quieter because of that vest and that big chest. And then something happens that changes the air. The boy's little hand comes out from one side of the vest searching, looking for something to hold. His small fingers, dirty with earth, find the man's shirt near the shoulder and grab. They squeeze hard. It's not a sweet touch. It's desperate. It's, don't let me go. Like that shirt is the only tree in the middle of a sea. His knuckles go white. His whole little hand shakes but doesn't let go. The man feels it, and inside him something turns into a knife. The guilt goes deeper because he imagines that tiny hand grabbing branches, grabbing vines, grabbing anything so many times, with no arm of his there. He closes his eyes for a second, breathing deep like he's holding back his own tears. He keeps his body over the two of them, doesn't change position, doesn't move much. He becomes silent too, the way the island demands. Her breathing starts to break, like she's trying to pull in air but it won't fit. Her chest rises and gets stuck, rises and gets stuck, and then it comes. First a low ugly sound, stuck, a broken then another, and then her crying explodes. It's not gentle crying, it's years of crying, crying from hunger, fear, sleepless nights, giving birth alone, bad people coming, running in the forest, forced silence. It's crying that comes out rough, almost a moan like her throat is rusty. She cries like someone who forgot she could. Her face stays hidden for a moment because she drops her head, pulls in her shoulders, tries to hide the sound, like crying was a dangerous weakness. But he doesn't let the world touch her. He stays there, kneeling, covering them both, breathing with her, repeating softly like a mantra with no rush, asking nothing. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And the boy, still holding his shirt, squeezes tighter when he hears her crying more, like he's scared she'll fall apart completely. And deep down, really deep down, the sound of the helicopter changes, like someone out there understood that the island won't give anyone up by force, and that there, in that bit of forest, a family was breaking and coming back together at the same time. Her crying slowly gets quieter, but it doesn't stop. It turns into a low, broken sound like shaky breathing. Her body is still shaking. The boy is still clinging to his shirt, fingers gripping the fabric like it's the last safe thing in the world. The man keeps his body over them a little longer. He listens. He feels. He doesn't rush. Even the way he breathes he controls, so he doesn't scare them. And the team, even far away, starts to move again. You can hear hurried footsteps in the sand, voices cut by the wind, a radio crackling. He lifts his head slowly, without pulling the vest off them all at once. He looks to one side like someone asking for silence just with his eyes. The men come closer through the trees, but they stop when they see the scene. He's kneeling, covering her and the child. the boy's tiny hand still holding onto him. One rescuer makes a hand signal, pointing to the beach, pointing to the helicopter. The gesture is clear. Let's go now. The man shakes his head just a little, like saying, wait. Then, very carefully, he lifts the vest off them. He doesn't yank it, doesn't pull, lifts it slowly, like taking a blanket off someone who's sick. Air comes back around her. And with the air, the sound comes back stronger too. The blades keep spinning, and each time the wind pushes, it feels like the forest complains. The light outside is too bright. The smell of fuel is still in the air. A smell that for her isn't just a smell. It's a memory of the world that hurts. She curls up right away. Her body closes. Her face turns to the side like she doesn't want to look anywhere. He notices. He doesn't say much. He just reaches out a hand, open, slow, and touches her shoulder from above, very gently, like someone asking permission without speaking. She doesn't pull away, but she doesn't relax either. The boy lets go of his shirt for a second, just to move on her back, then grabs it again like he's afraid to lose it. The team comes closer. One of them speaks too loud, too cheerful, like someone who thinks it's all over now. We're going to take you to the helicopter, miss. Everything's going to be fine. The word helicopter hits her like a rock. She freezes. Her look changes. It's not anger. It's pure panic. She tries to get up fast, like she's going to run again, but her legs fail a bit. She's weak, a long time living with little. Her body isn't made of iron. It's made of stubbornness. She takes a step back, trips on a root, almost falls. The man grabs her arm just in time, not squeezing, just steadying her so she doesn't fall, and with that touch, she feels warmth. But the sound outside grows. One of the men signals, let's go, and starts clearing a path toward the beach. Another one gets too close, reaching out like he's going to grab the boy or help take off the vine, and then she breaks down. Her body locks like a trap. She lets out a short, hoarse scream that doesn't even sound human, so torn it is. And with the scream, she spins her body to protect her back, to protect the boy. She pushes the rescuer with her shoulder, and her hand reaches for anything to become a weapon again. Her fingers hit the mud, search for the spear that fell, search for anything. The boy feels the change and goes stiff as a rock. He doesn't cry, but his face shows pure panic. His mouth opens, no sound, and he clings even harder to the man, like he already understands who's trying to stop the worst from happening. The sound of the blades, mixed with her scream, becomes chaos. She starts to hyperventilate, pulls air in fast, too fast, like she's drowning in her own chest. Her eyes go wide. She shakes her head like she wants to get the sound out. Her whole body trembles. The man sees it and decides right then. He turns to the team, and his voice comes out different. Not the calm voice from the forest. It's a commanding voice, short, cold, immediate. Stop, now. The team freezes. One of them tries to argue, speaking urgently. Sir, the helicopter has limited fuel. We need to... He cuts in. I said stop. He takes 2 steps forward, standing between her and any hand. His body becomes a wall again. His eyes don't blink. His face is stone. He points to the beach, then to the helicopter, like giving an order to a whole company, not just a few men. Cancel the flight. A strange silence falls inside the noise, because no one expects to hear that. Not there. Not after finding a survivor. A rescuer opens his eyes wide. Sir, that makes no sense. The protocol... He cuts again, lower but with even more weight. Protocol isn't worth more than her. The word her comes out like protection, like something he's guarding, like a promise. He glances at the woman. Her hand is on her chest, trying to breathe. Her shoulders are shaking. Her eyes are lost, like she's seeing something else entirely. Like the sound is bringing back the crash, the tearing metal, the screams, the impact. He looks back at the team. I want a sea rescue. Slow, quiet. No one crowding her. A big boat, space, blankets, food, a doctor, but quiet. Got it? No one answers at first. They just look at each other like waiting for someone to say he's gone mad. He steps closer to the team leader and speaks without raising his voice, but clearly not looking for a discussion. No one touches them. I'm staying. That sentence lands heavy. No one touches you. So I'm staying. He goes back to her, kneels beside her and speaks in a tone only she can hear, like a secret. You won't go up in that thing. I won't force you. I promise. She doesn't answer with words. She just shakes her head once. Small, like saying no, and she locks her eyes on him, like he's the only solid thing in all the noise. The man makes a hand signal. The rescuers step back. One of them speaks into the radio, and you can hear the nervous crackle, the voice repeating coordinates, asking for a boat, asking for support. The wind carries bits of the words away. The helicopter is still there, heavy, spinning, waiting, and then, like obeying the man, it starts to rise. Slowly, the sand lifts again, the wind pushes leaves, and the machine rises, like it's leaving without taking what it came for. He kneels in the mud near the rock, she leaning back, shaking with the boy still on her back. His vest thrown on the ground, dirty, her necklace still hitting her chest. Tock, tock, tock. The sound gets quieter as the helicopter rises. The vibration in the ground fades. The wind stops hitting so hard. The forest breathes again. She lets out a breath that seems to come from deep inside, like she'd been holding it for a long time. But the relief doesn't last, because now, without the helicopter, the island feels even more like an island. The sun slowly drops, and the light turns more yellow, more sad. The shadows of the trees grow. The air starts to cool a bit. The sea far away makes a calm sound that fools no one. He looks around and understands the obvious thing no one likes to say. They're going to have to stay here for a while. And she's still ready to run, even tired. The boy blinks slowly, like he's trying to understand why the sky stopped roaring. The team moves to set up a support point near the beach, but far enough not to scare them. They speak quietly now. They walk slowly, everything more careful. The man takes the sand-covered shirt off his neck, wipes his face with his hand and goes back near her without invading her space. He just sits on the ground beside her like saying, "I'm not leaving." The sun goes lower. The first cold breeze of the night touches her skin, and she shivers all over, the way only someone who's lived a long time on the streets understands. And when the daylight finally starts to die, the island seems to close its doors around them. Night falls, and even with people, radios, equipment, the feeling is the same. The island still hasn't let anyone go. The night falls for good, fast, like a black cloth thrown over the island. The heat of the day disappears and leaves a damp cold behind. It's not snow cold, but it's a chill that slowly seeps into the skin, especially when your clothes are sweaty and full of sand. The man notices this right away. He looks at her, at the way she pulls her shoulders in, at how her body closes up like it already knows what's coming. She doesn't complain. She doesn't ask for anything. She just adjusts the vine on her back, like that's the only job there is. The team, a bit further away, sets up small lights near the beach, but he signals for them to turn off the strong ones. He wants as little noise and light as possible. For her, the island is darkness and caution. Bright light is a threat. He stands up slowly and walks a few steps, looking for dry branches. His hand, which once held an expensive pen and the keys to a fancy car, now grabs dirty, heavy, rough wood. At first, he gets it wrong, picks up a damp branch that's no good, tries to snap it, and the sound cracks loudly. He stops, holds his breath, looks at her. She doesn't move, but her eyes say, "Put that down." He learns quickly, starts breaking the branches against his knee, holding the snapping part to muffle the sound. He picks dry leaves, pulls them gently, places them in a pile. The rescuer tries to help, but he just shakes his head firmly. He wants it to be him, because in his mind each bit of wood is like saying sorry. He goes back to her with arms full, and then he does the simplest thing. He doesn't come too close. He places the wood on the ground, a little off to the side, and looks at her like asking permission with his body. She watches. Her face doesn't change much, but her eyes follow his every move. There's still mistrust there, the kind that comes from being hurt for trusting. He takes a lighter someone from the team gave him. The metal shines a bit. When he flicks it on, the first flame makes a chick that cuts through the dark. She flinches slightly, just a bit, but he sees it, and he turns it off at once like it burned his finger. He takes a deep breath and tries a different way. He quietly asks a rescuer to bring him a stone and a piece of cloth. When they arrive, he makes the fire hidden, crouching, shielding the sound with his body. The first spark is weak. The second catches. The third really catches. The fire is born. Small at first, a shy tongue trembling in the wind. Then it grows, catching the branches, crackling softly. The heat begins to rise slowly, and the orange light throws shadows on the trees, like the forest is hiding people. She looks at the fire like someone looks at a weapon, because on the island, fire is life and danger at the same time. He sits on the ground on the other side of the fire, at a distance that doesn't crowd her. Not too close, not too far. A careful in-between. He folds his arms so he doesn't seem like he'll reach out. His fancy watch, now covered in sand, glints once in the firelight and then disappears into the dust again. The boy, still tied to her back, is quiet, but his eyes shine with the fire. The light dances inside his light pupils like a toy he's never seen before. A living glow, a glow that changes. She loosens the vine a bit, and the boy slides down slowly. It's not a normal climb down, it's practice. He already knows how to come down without making noise, without falling, without getting hurt. His feet touch the ground, and he crouches right away, close to her like that's the safe spot. The man watches, barely breathing, because he wants to hold the boy so badly it hurts. But he doesn't. He knows if he does, it's all over. He learns to keep his hands still, learns to hold the feeling inside. The woman picks up a piece of wood and moves the fire around, adjusting it. The move is automatic, like she's done it 1,000 nights. She glances at the man like she's measuring him. Can you stay quiet? He gets it. He stays quiet. Silence spreads, but it's not an empty silence. It's full of small sounds. The sea far away, a bug nearby, the wood crackling, her breathing still a bit shaky. He who came from a world of ringing phones and car engines learns something simple there. On the island, silence is respect. He doesn't try to fill it with words. He just stays. And that to her is strange, because people from the old world talk too much, ask too many questions, want to know too much. Not him. He stays, respecting her time. The boy, after a few minutes, starts looking at the man more. First, just out of the corner of his eye, then turns his head fully. His light eyes fix on him. The man holds back from giving a big smile. He just lets his face soften a bit. A small, tired smile, more in his eyes than in his mouth. The boy moves on the ground, slowly, like he's testing it. Takes a small step, stops, looks at his mum. She doesn't give a yes or a no, just watches. He takes another step, and another. The boy gets closer to the fire, and because of that, closer to the man. No fear for the first time. He doesn't run. He comes like a young animal, wary but curious. Stops at a safe distance and crouches. Knees bent, hands on the ground. He sniffs the air like the man's smell is part of the decision. The man feels his heart pounding too hard, but he doesn't move. The boy stretches his hand a bit towards the fire, feeling the heat. The light reflects on his face and makes his eyes look even more like the man's. An orange glow dancing, like the fire is inside them. The man, without thinking much, takes a clean piece of cloth from his pocket, something simple, a handkerchief, and places it on the ground, slowly, pushing it with his fingertips towards the boy, like he's offering a warmer place to sit, without touching, without invading. The boy looks at the cloth, then at the man, then at his mum. The mother stays still, but her eyes watch closely, and for a second, just for a second, the hardness in her gaze softens a little. It's not trust, it's just a pause in the war. The boy grabs the cloth and pulls it close, sits on it, and without realizing ends up closer to the man than he was before. The man swallows hard. His eyes sting. He looks at the fire to cover it up, because crying now would be too much, and because he doesn't want to scare anyone. The woman watches them. Her chest rises slowly. She takes in a bit of air and lets it out, like she's trying to remember what it's like to exist without running. Time passes in silence. The fire starts to go down, and they feed it again, carefully. The man copies how she moves the wood, learns to place it the right way so it doesn't crack loud, learns not to let sparks fly. When the early hours arrive, tiredness settles in. The woman lies on the ground near the fire, on her side, always in a way that shields the boy. It's not a resting position, it's a guarding one. The boy lies down too, but before closing his eyes, he pulls the cloth closer to the man and rests his forehead on his own arm, turned in his direction, like he wants to feel that he's there. The man doesn't move. He just lies down on the other side of the fire on the hard ground without complaining. Sand gets into his clothes. A rock digs into his back, but he doesn't care. In his mind, sleeping on the ground is the least he can do. He watches the flames shrinking and thinks a sentence he doesn't dare say out loud. I found you. The wind shifts. The smell of the sea gets stronger, and at some point in the middle of the night, a different sound appears. A sound of water, coming closer than it should. A louder, heavier shh, like the sea is rising slowly without warning anyone. The tide begins to come in. The tide comes like a gentle beast that no one sees arriving, until it's already too close. The sound of the water changes. From far away, the sea made a calm noise. Now it starts to hit harder, closer, licking the sand, pulling and bringing it back over and over. The man opens his eyes with a small fright because he feels cold dampness touch the tip of his shoe. He gets up right away, a bit clumsy, still groggy, and looks around. The fire is nearly just embers. The night's light is weaker now, and the sky far away starts to brighten in a grey tone. The woman is already standing. She doesn't sleep like the others. She only rests in bits, and when danger moves, she moves first. She picks the boy up quickly without a sound and already starts pulling things to a higher spot. Her look gives the order without words. Up, now. He understands right away and helps. Picks up what's on the ground. The vest, a team backpack, bottle, cloth. He follows her pace. No arguing, no questions, just does it. They climb a few meters through the sand, reaching a firmer part with rocks and tree roots. The water keeps coming. The sea at that moment doesn't look pretty. It looks like a monster wanting to swallow everything again. The team notices too. A rescuer comes running, speaking quietly but in a hurry. Says the boat is on the way. It'll arrive at dawn. They need to be ready. The word boat makes the woman freeze for half a second. Her body locks like someone pulled a string inside her. Her eyes go to the sea, still dark, huge. Her breathing goes short again. It's not just fear of noise. It's fear of water. Open water. No ground. No tree. No place to run. The man notices her change like a silent punch. He gets close but doesn't touch her. Speaks softly, in the way she can handle. It'll be slow. I'm with you. She doesn't answer. Just holds the boy tighter like his body is an anchor. Time drags on with the sky lightening in layers. First grey, then a dirty blue, then a faint yellow on the horizon, and then, far away, a dot appears in the sea, a dot that grows. The sound comes after, a low engine rumble, very different from the helicopter, less harsh, heavier. The boat arrives slowly, cutting through the waves, a big boat with trained people, with ropes, with life rings, with everything. It stops at a distance where they can lower a smaller, lighter boat to reach the sand. When she sees the open sea behind that boat, she goes pale. Her face hardens. Her eyes fix like she's seeing a fall again. Her mouth opens a little and closes, no sound coming out. Her chest rises and falls too fast. The boy looks at the sea and then looks at his mum. He understands her fear in his own way. He rests his forehead on her neck, quietly, like he wants to hide with her. The small boat reaches the sand and two men step down carefully. One holds out a hand to help. She pulls back right away. One step back, then another. Her body screams, "No." The man steps in front, firm but calm. He speaks to the men without looking much. "I'll go first." He walks to the edge of the water. The water hits his shin, cold. He gets on the boat and sits on the floor, not the seat, on the floor. Really low, really simple, like he's saying, "No one's the boss here. No one puts you on top, you stay close to the ground." He holds out his hand to her. Doesn't pull, just offers. "Come, however you want. I won't let go." She trembles. Her eyes go from him to the water to the big boat, from the boat to the horizon. Horizon is something that brings fear on the island because it has no end. She steps forward, the sand giving way, stops, breathes shortly. The boy stays, clung to her. The man doesn't say anything else. He just keeps his hand out, waiting. His face is serious, but his eyes full of care. She takes another step. The water wets her foot and she nearly goes back. Her fingers open like they're searching for the spear that's not there anymore. Her whole body wants to run, but the boy makes a small sound, almost a trapped whimper, and she looks at her son and remembers the obvious. For him to live, she has to cross. She closes her eyes for half a second and goes. She gets on the boat quickly, stumbling, nearly falling. The man holds her by the waist firmly and pulls her in. It's not a hug, it's safety. He pulls the boy too, carefully, and places him on his lap, sitting on the floor of the boat. He fits the small one there like something precious, protecting him with his body. The boy surprisingly doesn't struggle. He just watches, alert, but accepts the lap. Maybe because the warmth is good. Maybe because the man's smell is familiar now. She doesn't sit normally. She collapses on the floor of the boat, close to him, almost glued, like her body only knows how to be on the ground. And her hands grab his arm tightly, clenched. Her thin fingers press skin and fabric like claws. You can see her dirty nails leaving marks. It's not affection. It's fear. It's, "If you disappear, I'll die." He lets her, doesn't even try to pull away. He just puts one hand over hers firmly and speaks softly in her ear, very close, so she can hear even with the wind. "It's all right. I'm here. Look at me, just at me." She tries. She looks. And her eyes are wet, but it's not crying now, it's panic. The small boat starts moving away from the sand, pulled by the motion and the wave. The water gets deeper. The ground disappears. She feels it, and her whole body tenses. Her breathing turns shaky. She tries to stand like she could run inside the boat. But there's nowhere to run. The boat rocks. The engine, until then low, changes sound. The man notices the engine shift, feels the vibration on the floor of the boat. The engine is about to really start. The noise suddenly grows, and the boat jerks forward, and her body goes into full panic. She lets go of one hand from his arm and tries to throw herself forward, towards the water, like she could swim back to the sand, like the island is safer than the open sea. The man reacts right away, holds her tight enough to stop her, but carefully so he doesn't hurt her, pulls her back to the floor, pressing her body to his, and holds the boy on his lap with the other arm, turning into a kind of human knot in the middle of the boat. She struggles for a second, trying to escape, breathless, eyes wide, and the boat, now with the engine on, starts pulling out to sea. He presses his forearm against her chest, pinning her to the floor of the boat, and speaks softly, close to her ear, his deep voice shaking a bit too, because inside, he's scared of losing her again. No, look at me. Just at me. Look at me. Breathe with me." She doesn't listen at first. Her breathing comes in bits, short, fast, like the air turned into needles. Her hands find his arm again and grip it tightly. Her fingers squeeze so hard they leave marks. The boy in his lap goes stiff. His eyes go to the sea and back to his mum. He doesn't cry. He just makes a low, strange sound, a word that doesn't sound like a word. A language of their own. A small, made-up language, built from whispers and survival. The woman hears her son's sound and stops struggling for a second. Her eyes search for the boy. And in that second of pause, he takes his chance. He presses his forehead to hers quickly, like trying to give her warmth, and speaks slowly. "It's all right. I'm here." She shuts her eyes tight, like the word here hurts, but her body starts to loosen a little, just a bit. Enough that she doesn't try to jump anymore. The small boat keeps going until it reaches the bigger one. There they get help climbing up, and he makes sure he's the first to step on board again to show there's no trap. He doesn't let anyone pull her by the arm. He lifts her by the middle of her body and helps her up like she's made of glass. On the deck of the bigger boat, the wind is stronger. The open sea shows all around, endless. She looks and swallows hard. Her face goes pale again. Someone tries to put a blanket over her. She pulls back. He reaches out and takes the blanket first. He shows her it won't hurt. Then he gently puts it around her shoulders. It's one of those thin thermal blankets that make noise and shine in the light. Silver, shiny. It looks like it's from another planet next to her, who's lived years in rags. The boat's light hits it, and the blanket turns into a mirror, throwing white light onto her face. She squints, bothered. The brightness hurts. He sees that, and pulls her into a darker corner, away from the spotlight, away from the noise. The crew talks, walks, drags things around. Every sound makes her flinch. She shrinks in on herself, like she wants to hide inside her own body. The boy stays in his lap the whole time, and the boy doesn't let go. When a man in uniform tries to talk to the child, smiling, the child doesn't even look. He just turns his head to his mum and speaks softly in that strange language, like a code. The mum replies in the same code, a short sound, almost like a whistle mixed with a word. The man feels it then, a pain in his chest. They've built a world just for them, a wall, an invisible home. Because it was that or go mad. Hours later, the boat reaches a base, not a city yet, a support point, a rescue center with structure, doctors, radio, electric lights, the kind of place that for any normal person looks like salvation. For her, it looks like an attack. As soon as they enter, the lights are too bright. White, cold, ceiling lights. Lights that don't make shadows, the kind that shows everything, that doesn't let anyone hide. She stops at the door. Her body freezes, like she'll bounce back. Her eyes go glassy. The thermal blanket reflects the white light and throws bright flashes everywhere, and she looks smaller inside all that brightness, like a lost shadow. There are too many people. Too many. Footsteps, voices, questions, a radio crackling, a stretcher passing, a trolley with metal clanging. She starts breathing short again. Her chest rises and doesn't fall right. Her hands reach for his arm, and she grips it again like it's the only real thing there. He leans close to her. "No one's going to touch you. Just me. All right?" He looks at the crew and makes a gesture that doesn't ask. It orders, "Give her space. Now." And for some reason, everyone listens. Maybe it's his face. Maybe it's the way he becomes a wall in front of her. Maybe because it's clear that if someone touches her without care, she'll break. They take the three of them down a quieter corridor, a triage room with fewer people. Even then, the light bothers her. The smell of cleaning chemicals hits her nose and makes her wince like it's smoke. A doctor comes in calm, trying to be kind. "Ma'am, I'm just going to..." She curls up straight away. Her shoulder rises. Her eyes go hard. The boy speaks quickly in their language like a warning, "Danger," and she replies the same way, not taking her eyes off the doctor. The doctor stops, confused, looks at the man. He speaks softly, firmly. "Talk to me," not to her. The doctor nods and changes his tone. She needs checking, clear signs of malnourishment, and he glances at the woman, the way she shakes when someone walks by, the way she won't let go of the boy, even with bright lights in her face. He lowers his voice. "Severe trauma." The word severe hangs in the air like a stamp. The man clenches his jaw. His eyes burn. Inside, he thinks something that hurts. Don't call it trauma like it's a paper word. This is a broken life. But he doesn't argue. He just wants to get her out of there. A room. Quiet. Now. They're taken to a simple room with light walls, but softer lighting. And when the door shuts, the noise of the world stays outside. The woman exhales like she'd been holding her breath for minutes. She leans against the wall and slides down, sitting on the floor. The thermal blanket crumples, makes a thin noise, and reflects a bit of the lamp's light, a softer glow. The boy sits close to her, and only then seems to breathe easier. The man kneels in front of them, not touching, waiting for her to allow with a look. He doesn't know what to say. He has 1,000 questions, but he doesn't ask. He just says what matters. "You're safe." She looks at him and her look changes, like for the first time she's recognized him. She laughs without humor, a small broken sound, like safe was a word in another language. She looks at him, and this time her eyes aren't just panic. There's tiredness, old anger, and pain too big to hold. She touches her own neck and touches the cracked pendant, like it gives her courage, and then she starts to talk. At first it comes out low, like her voice is rusty from not speaking, but she pushes. She needs to get it out. She talks about the plane, the sound of metal, the smell of smoke, the impact that knocked the air from her lungs. She remembers the world spinning, her body hitting everything, the silence after, that awful silence that comes when sound stops all of a sudden, and you realize you're still alive. She says she woke up with pain everywhere, blood in her mouth, the taste of iron. She says there were people alive, some hurt, some screaming, others too quiet, and she was pregnant. She lowers her hand to her belly without thinking, like she still feels it. She says with a voice shaking from shame and fear that she was waiting a few more months to tell him, that she wanted to be sure, wanted to do it right, wanted to wait for the right moment. And the crash came a day before she would tell the truth. The man stays still, like someone stabbed him slowly. His eyes go to the boy, back to her. He doesn't speak. He can't. She goes on. She says on the island the survivors came together, made fire, hunted, tried to keep hope, helped each other, shared water, shared shade, and when her belly grew they helped more, because she was weak, because she threw up, because her body needed things the island didn't have. She tells how she gave birth there, on the ground, with pain that felt like it would tear her in half. She says a woman held her hand, a man made a knife from stone, someone cried when the baby finally breathed. She says that, and looks at the boy. Her eyes soften for a second, like that was the only beautiful moment she remembers. Then her face closes again. She talks about the boat, a boat that showed up months later, one day on the horizon. They went wild with joy. They screamed, waved, cried, hugged, because they thought it was the end of the nightmare. And when the boat came close, it wasn't rescue. It was men dirty on the inside. They looked at the women like they were things, like their bodies were prizes. She swallows hard. Her hand grips the thermal blanket and crumples it, making that soft, nervous noise. She says they tried to fight back. There was a struggle, there was screaming, there was blood. Some of the survivors died right there trying to protect, trying to stop it. She doesn't give all the details, but the way her voice cracks says enough. Her eyes go distant, like she's seeing it again. She says she ran ran with the baby still small, ran into the forest like a hunted animal. And she never went back to that spot, never got near people again. She slowly lifts a leg without thinking. On her shin, near her knee, there's a deep scar, thick, uneven. A cut that didn't heal well, a cut that left a mark forever. She runs her finger over it, and her hand shakes. "It was when I ran," she whispers, like it's nothing, but her face shows it wasn't. The man looks at the scar and feels his chest squeeze so tight he wants to scream. He wants to say sorry for the whole world. He wants to go back in time and pull her out with his own hands. But he can't. He only has now. And now he stays there on his knees, not interrupting, while she finishes the sentence with the softest voice in the world, almost disappearing. After that, I just survived. That's it. Me and him. And the boy, as if he knows his mum went too far inside her own mind, leans his head on her shoulder and speaks softly in their language. A short phrase, like a hug made of sound. She closes her eyes, and the silence in the room grows heavy, like the world outside doesn't deserve to come in. The woman leans against the wall, the thermal blanket crumpled in her hands. The silver shine reflects the soft light from the lamp and throws white patches onto the ceiling. She looks too tired to lift her head. The boy is still close to her, stuck, like the two of them are one single thing. The man stands up slowly. His knees hurt from staying on the floor, but he doesn't care. He looks around and sees the bed, a real bed, clean sheet, pillow, everything soft, everything right. Everything just how anyone would ask for after going through hell. But no one there asks. The woman doesn't move towards the bed. She stays in the corner near the wall as if the wall is protection. And the boy looks at the mattress like it's a strange place. A place that sinks. A place that makes fabric sounds. A place with no solid ground. A nurse comes in just to leave water and a tray with simple food. The man signals her not to speak loudly. She leaves. He picks up the tray and places it on the floor near them. Again, on the floor, not on the table. He copies their world, because it's the only way not to break it. The boy smells the food and grabs a piece with his hand, fast. He doesn't use cutlery. He eats like he's hiding. Small bites, looking around like someone might take it away. The woman eats little, swallows with difficulty. Her body doesn't trust plenty. The man watches, unable to stop. Every movement of theirs hits him like a hammer of guilt. When the boy finishes, he picks up a piece of wood he brought in secret, a smooth, worn piece like a toy, and a tool at the same time. He holds it gently, presses it to his chest, like it's a home. The man notices, and his heart sinks. The boy yawns. His body leans, heavy. His head drops to the side. The mother arranges him on the floor in a corner, like it's the most normal thing in the world. She pulls the thermal blanket over him, but doesn't cover everything, leaves space for him to breathe, and for her to see his face. The man points at the bed with his chin, very slowly, almost asking. She doesn't look, just shakes her head once, firmly. Then she moves the boy on the floor closer to her and sits beside him, leaning her back on the wall. The man stands still, not knowing what to do with his hands. He waits for the boy to really fall asleep, waits for the breathing to get deeper, slower, waits for that small body to relax a bit. When he sees the child is sleeping, he looks more carefully. The boy doesn't sleep hugging a teddy bear, doesn't sleep with a pillow. He sleeps hugging the piece of wood, the piece. The small fingers stay wrapped around it tight even while sleeping. The light from the lamp hits his face and shows sun marks, dirt that hasn't fully come off, an old scratch near his chin. The man feels his chest tighten, and this time he doesn't hold it in. He turns his face away so no one can see, but his eyes fill up. His throat burns. In his head a sentence appears like someone whispered in his ear, "My heir learnt to hunt before he learnt to speak," and that destroys him, because he imagines the little child learning to stay silent, not to die, learning to recognize snake sounds, learning to run barefoot, learning to eat little, learning to use wood as safety, while he slept in a bed, while he had food, while he had people. He looks at the watch still dirty with sand on his wrist and wants to tear it off, throw it away, because time for him has become the enemy. He sits on the floor on the other side of the room, far from the boy not to wake him, and stays there, like a guard. The woman watches the boy with half-closed eyes. She doesn't truly sleep, she just rests her body, but her mind is always ready. The man gathers courage and speaks low, almost a breath. "I'll take you with me, home, to our home, to a safe place." She doesn't answer straight away. Silence comes again. She takes a deep breath and when she speaks, her voice is dry, direct. "I'm not going." He swallows. "You need a doctor, you—" She cuts him off without raising her voice, but firm. There's already too many people here. She looks at the light, the ceiling, the walls, like it's all a shiny cage. City is noise, is eyes, is hands. She touches the scar on her leg without noticing, an automatic gesture. "I'm not going to the city." He feels the sentence hit him like a slammed door. He wanted to argue, wanted to say there's safety, there's money, there's everything. But he remembers the boat she described, remembers the way she shook when someone reached their hand out to her son. Money doesn't erase that. He lowers his voice even more. "I'll do it the way you can handle." She doesn't say yes, doesn't say no, just stays quiet, looking at the boy. The night moves slowly. At some point, the bass gets quieter. Voices in the halls grow faint. The sound of footsteps becomes rare. The light from the hallway under the door becomes a thin line. The man stays on the floor. He closes his eyes for a few seconds but opens them again. He can't relax. His body is there, but his mind is back on the island, back on the what if. And in the middle of the night, a small sound happens. A soft click. He opens his eyes. The woman is standing, barefoot. The thermal blanket is now thrown over her shoulder like a cape, and the silver shine moves in the dark like a fish. She holds the boy in her arms carefully without waking him fully. The child still holds the piece of wood, even asleep, and his arm is wrapped around it. She walks to the door. No shoes, no sound. Her foot touches the cold floor of the room, and then the hallway, and she doesn't even react. Cold is an old friend to her. The skin on her feet tough can take it. She opens the door just enough to slip through. The hallway light hits her face and she blinks, but keeps going. She wants to run. Again. Her instinct tells her that when there are too many people, too much light, too many promises, it's time to disappear before someone takes what's yours. She walks down the hall with the boy in her arms, her body bent to protect. Her steps are quick, silent like in the forest. The man gets up at once. No shouting, no calling anyone. He just follows a few steps behind, his heart pounding and his hand open, like he's trying to reach without scaring her. She gets to an exit door, a hallway that leads outside. She puts her hand on the handle, and that's when he appears beside her, blocking the way with his body but without touching her. He speaks softly. "No." She slowly turns her face. Her look is like a wolf, not hatred, protection. It says, "If you try to stop me, I'll bite." The boy moves in her arms, still half asleep, and makes a soft sound in their language, like he's calling his mum back inside. She doesn't take her eyes off the man, and the cold hallway, with white light, becomes too small to hold that decision. Her eyes stay fixed on him, hard, shining under the white hallway light. Her hand is on the door handle. The boy in her arms is heavy, warm, half asleep, holding the piece of wood like it's part of his own arm. She breathes short, ready to open the door and disappear right then. He knows that if he touches her, if he grabs her arms, if he tries to take the boy, she'll turn wild again, she'll scream, she'll hit, she'll run, and everyone will come, and then she'll never trust again. So he doesn't stop her. He just does one thing that no one's done to her in years. He lowers himself, slowly. He leans his back against the corridor wall and sits on the cold floor, right there near the door, without blocking it with his body, without putting his hand on the handle, without being a wall. He becomes the floor. He becomes, "I'm not a threat." She blinks, confused, like her brain doesn't know where to place that. He looks up at her, voice low, deep, steady. "I'll follow your pace. I'll do whatever's needed. You'll never go through hardship again. I want to protect you, care for you, love you, make you feel safe." The sentence doesn't come rushed. It doesn't come with pressure. It comes like a simple promise, the kind that doesn't hurt. She stays still, hand still on the handle, body shaking inside. The door right there, so close, calling. But the scene breaks the rule she's learnt. People from the old world always pull, always order, always take. He's not pulling, he's waiting. The silence stretches. The hallway feels colder. The base's aircon blows cold wind against her legs and she shivers. Her bare foot touches the floor and aches from the cold, but she doesn't complain. The boy shifts a little in her lap and lets out a soft sound, a word in their language. Sounds like he's asking for a better cuddle, for sleep, for stay. She closes her eyes for a second, opens them, and her hand lets go of the handle. It's not surrender, it's tiredness. She steps back, leans on the wall too beside him, and slowly lowers herself until she's sitting on the floor. The thermal blanket slips from her shoulder and makes that thin paper sound. She settles the boy on her lap, lying across her, and runs her hand through his hair, the way only a mother does when she wants to say, "It's okay," without speaking. Now, the three of them are there, on the floor, leaning on the wall, as if the floor is the only place that still feels real. The man breathes deep like he just came up from underwater, and he speaks softly without staring too hard, so it doesn't feel like pressure. He needs vitamins, a doctor, but the right way, without touching him, without scaring him. She doesn't answer straight away, just hugs the boy a bit tighter like the word doctor still feels like a knife. He carries on gently. "I can bring someone here. Just one person. Calm. Speaks softly. You stay with him the whole time." She looks at the floor. Her eyes go to the piece of wood tied to the boy's arm. She runs her finger over the object like it's a memory key. Her voice comes out low, hoarse. "Everyone says it'll be calm." He swallows, because he knows she's right. He grips his own knee hard, holding back a flood of things he wants to say. But he has to say what matters. He has to give her something solid. "I'm not asking you to trust words. I'm staying here." She slowly turns her face and looks at him. And for the first time, her eyes don't seem ready to bite. They seem tired, a deep tiredness, like someone who's carried the world on their back. He breathes and lets the guilt out in the shape of truth, plain and bare. "I looked for you." She stays still. He goes on, even quieter. "I lost half my fortune looking." She blinks like that doesn't matter, and really to her money doesn't buy peace. But the words hit something else. Proof of persistence. He rubs his face, worn out, like a man who hasn't slept properly in years. Inside, everyone said, "It's over." Said, "There's no more chance." Said, "Let it go." He gives a short laugh, no joy in it. "I never stopped." The woman holds her breath. Her chest rises and doesn't fall for a moment, like she's hearing something she's not sure is a trap or truth. He looks at the boy, then back at her. "I counted every day." The word every comes out heavy. Every single one. He swallows hard, his eyes getting wet again, but he doesn't cry. He holds it in, just lets his voice crack a bit. "It was 1,183 days. The woman's face tightens, but it's like the sentence goes through her skin and lands deep inside. He says the rest like it's written in blood. 3 years, 2 months, and 28 days. When he finishes, the hallway goes even quieter. Even the aircon seems softer. She stares at nothing like she's trying to understand that. While she was counting days to survive, he was counting days to find her. The boy sighs in her lap, sleeping deeper, and his grip on the piece of wood loosens a little. His breathing is calm for a moment, a rare moment. The man uses that moment to make one more request. Very simple. Let him drink real water. Eat without fear. Be a child, like he should be. She doesn't say yes. She answers with a small gesture, brushes a strand of hair from the boy's face, and adjusts the thermal blanket over his chest. A way to say, "I'll try." He doesn't smile big, just breathes, and stays there sitting like he promised. The choice is made, even without words. There, in that cold corridor, he shows he won't push, won't drag, won't use force. He'll stay. And that's when the world still outside starts knocking on the door. Far away, somewhere in the base, a voice rises too loud. A short laugh. A phone vibrates. A radio crackles. A name is said. And at the edge of the corridor, a door opens and closes quickly. A person walks by in a hurry, looking sideways. A curious look. A look that shouldn't be there. The woman notices and stiffens. The man sees it too. His body shifts. His eyes go hard again. Not at her, but at the world. Because he knows that kind of look. The look of someone who doesn't want to help, wants a story. And while the three still sit on the floor trying to exist in silence, someone somewhere is already spreading the story. Someone's already found out she's been found. The rushed look in the hallway won't leave his mind. It's a hungry look. Not for food, for news. The billionaire feels his blood heat up. His body goes stiff like he just heard a gunshot. He doesn't raise his voice there because he knows any outburst will scare her. But inside, he's already made up his mind. No one will turn that woman into a show. He stands up first, slowly, still calm on the outside. He gives a short hand signal to his team, always nearby even when they try to look invisible. 2 men appear at the end of the hallway like shadows. No guns, just presence. He crouches near her, speaks at eye level, softly. "I'm getting you out of here. Now." Quietly. She holds the boy tight in her arms. Her chest rises and falls quickly. Her instinct says to run, but she looks at his face and sees something she hadn't before. Anger at the world, not at her. Protection. They leave through a sideway, a service hallway, darker, no people. He walks one step ahead but keeps looking back to check on her. She's still barefoot, walking firmly, holding the boy. The thermal blanket makes a soft noise with each step. When they reach an exit, the car is already waiting. Dark windows. Engine on, but quiet. He opens the door and gets in first again to show it's safe. She gets in after, curled up looking around like a cornered animal. On the way he keeps the radio off. No talking, just the sound of the car and their breathing. But the world doesn't need loud sound to hurt. His phone vibrates once, then again. Then it becomes a flood like someone plugged it into a socket. He tries to ignore it. Another vibration, and another, until he looks. The screen is full of messages, alerts, links, missed calls. And then a piece of news appears, huge, shouting without sound. A big headline with a photo of the helicopter and a blurry image of her. Aggressive words, curious, cruel. Survivor found after 1183 days. And right below, worse phrases. Is she mentally stable? Whose child is it? Was she really alone? Shocking secret on the island. His stomach turns. The phone camera shows more short videos, people commenting, laughing, doubting. And the worst is seeing how they talk about her like she's a rare animal, like she's not a person who bled. He squeezes the phone so hard his hand almost locks. She notices, doesn't ask. But her eyes go to the phone, suspicious. She's already learned the old world comes in through small things. What is it? Her voice is low, rough. He takes a deep breath, decides not to lie. Lies kill trust. They found out. She understands straight away. Her body goes stiff like a board. The boy wakes slightly from her tension and makes a soft sound in their language like asking danger. She answers in the same code, short to calm him. But her eyes drift off, full of bad memories. When the car arrives at the place he chose, it's not a busy hospital, not a hotel. It's one of his spaces, safe. A closed building with security far from windows and people. Even so, there's already movement outside. A press car passes slowly. A motorbike stops in a corner. A man with a camera tries to look through the dark window. He tells the driver to go straight in. Gate closes. Security makes a barrier. Inside, he takes her to a simple, quiet room with soft light. It's not luxury in a loud way. It's clean comfort, nothing flashy. He orders anything that makes noise to be removed. No doorbells, no phones ringing, no people entering without warning, but it's no use. Outside, the story explodes. Within hours, people around the world are talking about her, and not with respect. They say she went crazy. They say she made it up. They say the child might not be his. They say she disappeared on purpose. They say she's too wild to raise a child. Each sentence is a punch. He tries to shield her, but the internet goes through walls. Then the real attack begins. It's not just gossip, it's pressure. An authority asks for evaluation. Someone asks for a photo of the boy. A specialist wants to speak. A reporter tries to get in. A lawyer from who knows where says, the child needs to be seen. She feels it in the air even if she doesn't understand everything. Her body goes back into escape mode. She pushes the bed to the corner and makes a spot on the floor, like the floor is safer. The boy stays close, holding a piece of wood. He looks at them both and feels a cold, clear rage, the kind that doesn't shake. He picks up the phone and starts calling. Not friends, people who fix things. First, lawyers, the best. Then, real doctors, the kind who speak softly. Then, security, more people, more barriers. Then, PR. But with one clear order, no one speaks without him. With each call, his voice is low and deadly. I don't want opinions. I want control. And when someone on the team tries to say, this will be hard, he cuts in. Hard was her surviving alone. That same day, there are already press cars at the building entrance. Cameras, people shouting questions like, she's done something wrong. She hears the shouts and covers the boy's ears. He flinches at the voices and curls up. Their language comes out again fast, like a prayer without religion, just protection. He decides to face it the right way. He won't leave her alone in this. He won't put her in front of cameras. He won't push her to speak. He'll be the shield. He goes down with a small team. Security clears the way. He walks through the noise like stone. Reporters shout, is she okay? Did she go mad? Who's the child's father? Is the child really yours? Will she take a test? He doesn't rush to answer. He stops, looks at everyone calmly. A strange silence falls, because when a man like that stops, even those shouting freeze. He says just one sentence, deep, firm. No one touches them, and he turns his back. Even so, the next day the pressure grows. They ask for proof, ask for a statement, ask for a test, ask to see the child. The story turns into a circus, and powerful people want in. Because anything rare becomes a product. He takes the case to where he can shut the door, the law. Then it's meeting after meeting, document after document. A doctor talking about trauma, a lawyer talking about protection, security showing photos of online threats, him showing he will protect them. He doesn't say please. He says, this is how it's going to be. And when they suggest that mother and child might be separated for evaluation, he almost breaks the table with his hand. No one separates mother and child. That sentence becomes rule, becomes line, becomes wall. The day comes to appear in front of cameras outside the court building or at a hearing. Everything's packed. Microphones, flashing lights, people pushing. She doesn't want to go, doesn't want lights, doesn't want noise. He doesn't force her to speak, but he asks one small thing, to stand behind him, close, that's all. So no one thinks he made it up. So no one says she doesn't exist. She comes down with the simple blanket on her shoulders. No makeup, no decoration. Hair tied however it can be. The boy in her arms, curled up, watching everything like it's an attack. He holds her hand. And that's the detail everyone films. His hand holding hers in front of the cameras. It's not a hand of ownership. It's an anchor. She shakes, but doesn't let go, because there, in the middle of the noise, she understands. If she lets go, she'll fall. The boy holds his finger tight, like that finger is a rope. And that moves everyone, even the coldest ones, because children don't fake that kind of thing. Inside the room, someone asks for a final statement. An important person, firm voice, saying it's time to end doubts. The billionaire stands slowly. He feels his throat tighten, but his voice comes out strong. It's not a pretty speech. It's a sentence. He gently pulls the boy, not snatching him from her arms, just fitting in, so he doesn't scare him. The boy lets him, looking at his mum first. She looks back, tense, but lets it happen too, because she trusts him now. He lifts the boy, not too high, not like a trophy. Just enough for everyone to see the face, the clear eyes, the small hand still holding his finger. The camera catches the detail, the boy holding his finger, tight, like saying, this is my place. The billionaire looks around, looks at the doubters, at the ones wanting a show, and speaks short, clear, this is my air. The room changes. The air gets heavy. The noise outside feels further away. She, behind him, tries to breathe, tries to stay standing. But when she hears that said out loud, in front of people, in front of the world, something breaks free inside her. Her face tightens, her chin shakes, and the tears fall all at once, thick, uncontrollable. She collapses in silence like someone who held on for years and in 1 second can't anymore. Her tears fall without sound, but they feel loud inside his chest. The boy, in his arms, feels his mum's body shaking and turns his face towards her. His light eyes squint, like he's trying to understand why she's breaking. He reaches out his little hand to her, searching. The billionaire gently and quickly lowers the boy, placing him back in her lap, like he's returning a part of her body. She holds her son tightly against her chest, and the little one buries his face in her neck, as if to hide both of them from the world. After that, everything becomes a blur of doors, hallways, signing papers, people speaking softly, people trying to be polite. He doesn't let anyone come near her. He clears the way. He blocks the way. He tells them to cancel interviews, to turn off the bright lights, to take phones away from her face. When they finally return to the safe place, it's already night. A heavy silence fills the space, the kind of silence that isn't peace. Not yet. She goes in first. She looks around the room like someone looking for an exit. Her body is still on alert. The boy sticks close, holding the piece of wood like it's a shield. He closes the door behind them, locks it, signals for the guards to stay outside, far away. No one comes in, no one hears. Inside, it's just the three of them and the soft sound of the air conditioner. She walks slowly through the room like she doesn't trust the floor. The bed is there, neatly made. She doesn't go near it. She heads straight to the darkest corner and sits on the floor, leaning against the wall the way her body knows how. The boy sits with her and rests his head on her leg. His tiredness wins for a few minutes. He closes his eyes, but still holds the piece of wood. The billionaire stands in the middle of the room, not knowing where to put his own guilt. His suit is wrinkled. His watch still has sand on it. His face looks older than yesterday, not from age, from weight. He looks at her, quiet on the floor, looks at the boy, too small for so much story. And the image of the island comes back clearly in his mind. The spear, the bloody vine, the fear in her eyes, the boy's silence. He swallows hard, takes 2 steps towards them and stops. He doesn't want to invade. He doesn't want to scare, but he also can't stay away. His voice comes out soft, nearly breaking. I wanted today to be the end of all this. She doesn't answer, doesn't look, just runs her hand through the boy's hair, slowly, like she's counting each strand, like that's what's keeping the world in place. He takes a deep breath and steps closer. Then, without warning, he kneels. His knee touches the floor with a quiet sound. A man like him, kneeling, is a scene that barely exists in his world. But here, in this room, he owns nothing. He's just someone asking. He stays close enough for her to hear him, but not so close that she feels trapped. He lowers his head and his voice is deeper, broken inside. You were never meant to survive on your own. The sentence isn't dramatic. It's a painful truth. He lifts his eyes just a bit and they're wet, but he holds back the tears. He goes on slowly, choosing simple words because pain doesn't match with big words. I failed you. I failed him. She keeps a hard face, but her breathing changes. It gets shorter, like each word touches an old wound. He reaches out his hand not to grab her, just to touch the space between, like asking permission from the ground. I should have protected you, before everything. I should have understood you. I should have listened. His throat tightens. He swallows and tries again. I let you carry the worst part alone. Then he does something that even surprises him. He leans forward slowly, carefully, and rests his forehead on her body, not on her face, not on her hand, on the place closest to the boy, her belly, as if he's also saying sorry for the time their son grew there, in silence, without him knowing. His forehead stays there still, feeling her warmth through the simple fabric, a gesture so intimate it feels forbidden, a gesture from a man who no longer knows how to speak and needs to show instead. The detail is clear, his forehead on her belly, his shoulder shaking a little, his hand open on the floor like someone who dropped all his weapons. The boy opens his eyes for a moment, confused, and looks at the man kneeling. He doesn't understand everything, but he understands the feeling. And slowly, he relaxes again as if that gesture isn't a threat. The woman stays stiff. Her body doesn't know how to receive this. Accepting an apology is dangerous because it opens a door, and an open door can bring pain again. She stares ahead, at nothing. Her eyes go far, like she's on the island again. Like she's hearing the sea. Like she's feeling the fear from years ago. The man doesn't move, doesn't push, just stays. I'm sorry, he whispers. I really am. Silence returns and settles heavy between them. He waits for a word, a sign, a go away, a stop, a that's enough. But she gives nothing. She doesn't push, doesn't hug, doesn't speak. She just breathes and still doesn't answer. The silence of that night wasn't broken by words. He stayed there on his knees until his legs hurt, until his forehead warmed against her body, until her breathing became less short. And when he got up, he did it slowly, like someone trying not to scare a hurt animal. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. She just pulled the boy a bit closer, and that for him was already a beginning, a thread. Life didn't turn into a pretty film after that. It became a slow routine, one step at a time. At first, she didn't want the window open. The sound from the street made her chest freeze, so he changed the glass, changed the door, changed anything that made loud noise. He removed a beeping watch, took out the doorbell, turned off the loud phone. The mansion, once full of echo and luxury, became a soft place, almost silent. She didn't like white lights, so he had yellow, low lights put everywhere, lamps instead of ceiling lights, shadow instead of harsh brightness. She didn't accept people coming in, so he kept the house to just a few people, 2, 3 at most. Always the same ones, always letting her know before, always speaking softly, always stopping if she tensed up. The boy changed in his own way. At first, he walked on tiptoe, even on the soft carpet, as if the carpet was dry leaf that could give him away. He kept food in his pocket, hid bits of bread behind cushions, and always slept with a piece of wood. And they let him, because taking it away would be breaking something. Little by little, the boy began to take a glass of water, without looking around. Started eating without hiding. Started playing with simple things. A small ball, a toy car, a leaf that fell in the garden. And still, when any loud sound came, he ran to his mother's body, and she became a wall in front. Always. The billionaire learnt not to correct that. He learnt to stand in front too. He learnt to become a wall as well. And there was one thing no one expected, but it became a rule in the house. They didn't sleep in the bed. Not that one. She tried one night, sat on the edge, sank into the mattress, and her body froze. It felt like quicksand. She got up straight away, breathing fast. The boy whimpered softly, scared by the change, and went straight to the floor. He didn't insist. The next day he changed the living room completely, took out the heavy sofa, removed extra tables, left the space open. And there, in the middle of the mansion's living room, he set up a tent. A real tent. Strong fabric, low frame, no decoration, no luxury, just a closed place with a low ceiling, like a safe cave. Inside he put blankets on the floor, lots of them, layers, like a nest. When she saw it, she didn't smile, didn't say thank you, but she stood looking for a while with eyes full of something that didn't know how to become words. That night she went in first, slowly, kneeled down, touched the blanket, felt the firm floor below, felt the low ceiling, felt that in there no one could see, no one judged, no one arrived by surprise. The boy came in just after, and for the first time in a long while, he let go of the piece of wood for a few seconds, just to pull the blanket and lie down better. The billionaire came in last, took off his shoes, sat on the floor, leaned his back on the tent wall and stayed quiet. And there, inside that small space, in the middle of a huge mansion, they breathed the same way. Time passed. A year of slow mornings, a year of learning new sounds, a year of small steps, a year of being startled and hearing "I'm here" said 1,000 times without hurry. The island didn't disappear all at once. It became a memory stuck to the skin. Sometimes it came in dreams, sometimes in the smell of rain, sometimes in a shadow in the corridor. But the memory started feeling more distant, not because they forgot, but because something else was now taking up space. Safety. On a late summer afternoon, the sun was low, and the house was quiet. The boy was in the living room, sitting on the floor, drawing with thick pencils. His hand didn't shake as much anymore. He spoke more, short words, mixed ones, some still in their own language, some new from the outside world, and when he got something wrong, no one laughed. The woman was nearby, leaning on the door that led to the garden, feeling the wind on her face. She still liked to stay near exits. Survival habit. But now sometimes she left the door shut. Small victories. The billionaire was on the veranda looking at the sea far away. Not the island's sea, a calm sea from a rich city, but still the sea. The water shone orange, and the sound of the waves was soft, repeated, almost like breathing. He looked at the horizon and felt the lesson hit him inside, simple and sharp. Love didn't stop the crash. Love alone didn't keep the plane in the sky. Love didn't chase bad men away. Love didn't close her wound. Love didn't put food in the boy's hand on the island. But rescue. Rescue gave survival meaning. Because rescue isn't just finding. Rescue is staying after. It's learning the other's fear. It's not pushing, it's protecting without trapping. It's saying, "I'm here," again and again, until it becomes true. He went back to the living room and stopped at the entrance to the tent, still set up there, still standing like part of the house, like part of them. The woman looked at him. Her eyes still had scars, but now there was a calm that didn't exist before. It wasn't ad-happy calm. It was real calm. The kind that comes when the body finally believes it doesn't need to run all the time. The boy stood up and ran to him, not like a scared animal, like a child. He grabbed his father's finger tight and pulled, wanting to show the drawing, and the billionaire bent down, looked at the drawing, and laughed quietly. A short, warm laugh. A sound that a year ago would have been impossible in that place. He looked at the two of them and thought, without saying, "The island tried to take everything, but it didn't win. And now, before finishing, I ask you one simple thing. If this story truly touched you, leave a like. It really helps the video reach more people. And if you want to keep living stories like this with me, subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, truly from the heart, could you love someone who lost you, even if they looked for you every day?